We've always had two eyes, for a reason. Some scientists will tell you that they assisted our hunter-gatherer ancestors to judge the rate of approach of a hostile beast. Common sense tells you that we need them to avoid walking into things and to successfully pick up objects. Regardless, it's all about the same thing: depth perception. It's true that those with vision in only one eye can also perceive a degree of depth, such as by clues from surrounding lighting, or from your eye focusing clearly on only one thing. But that's something else entirely. We're talking about the ability to perceive the distance between subjects in your point of view in a very special way. Through stereo vision. But what exactly is 3D? And like so many other things, how has man tried to recreate it? "3D" has often been used to describe things that have an illusion of depth in some way, such as video games and computer-animated movies that contain 3D models existing in a virtual 3D world in which different angles can be seen from different perspectives. However, stereo 3D involves seeing two slightly different images at the same time, with our brain doing the rest of the work. Imagine you're seeing this scene with your left eye. You also see the same thing with your right eye, but from a slightly different angle. Notice how objects in the scene will shift based on their proximity. Now, combine the two viewpoints, left and right, and it's in 3D. So, while some people might think that 3D is just stuff coming at you, that would be quite an oversimplification, as 3D is the full range of depth perception, both near and far. 3D is based on the principle of parallax, which relates to a shift in perspective when viewing objects from different vantage points. This principle is used by astronomers to calculate the distance between objects in space. In the case of 3D, parallax refers to the layers of depth in an image that can be adjusted post-capture, but are always dependent on one another. To illustrate, imagine this line is a 3D screen viewed from overhead. Parallax is represented by the two lines forming an X. This is the full range of available depth, and the point where the lines intersect is called zero parallax. This area would appear flush on a 3D display without glasses. Anything that appears to extend out of the screen is negative parallax, and into the screen is positive parallax, both of which will diverge from each other and be more or less blurry without glasses, depending on how far in or out they are. The parallax can be adjusted back and forth to make the subject of focus at zero parallax, or for a technical or artistic reason. In any case, the baked-in parallax from a 3D camera can't be enlarged or reduced, only moved back and forth. The range you have to work with is dependent on the width between the two lenses of the camera and your distance to what you're recording. For instance, a wide-set 3D camera would provide more depth at the same range of a narrow-set one. It could be useful for more distant shots, but unusable for close shots, seeing as depth can't be reduced and the images would be too far set apart for our eyes to properly fuse. To have more flexibility, besides dedicated 3D cameras, many use camera rigs consisting of two identical cameras whose interaxial, or distance between lenses, can be adjusted. Another reason to adjust parallax is to make a scene more visually pleasing. For instance, in this shot, my hand is in negative parallax, but it's partially obstructed by the frame of the screen, which is a conflict of logic. This is known as a window violation. To fix it, I'd move the offending area to 0 parallax. Not that window violations are always bad, they can work fine in some contexts. Finally, here's an image without a violation. Decent range of depth, but it's all behind the window, and I want a little more pop. Since the foremost region is unobstructed, I would move my torso to 0 parallax, allowing my hand to come out of the screen. But you don't need a 3D camera or dual rig to make quality 3D. All it takes is any camera you already have, such as your smartphone. The only exception is, whatever you take a picture of has to be perfectly still. If you're only a few feet away from your subject, snap a photo, move sideways about an inch, and snap another. If the nearest object is closer or farther, you can reduce or increase the distance to get the depth you want. I personally use the 3D Steroid Pro app to align the images and save them as 3D. If you like 3D still photos, then you'll love 3D video, which opens up a whole new world of possibilities. If you don't have 3D glasses, that's okay, if you learn how to free view. If you save the images side by side, and then diverge your eyes, you may be able to see it in 3D. This is the same principle used in the popular Magic Eye book series, which would hide 3D images inside seemingly random pattern stereograms. I personally can't diverge my eyes, but I can cross them. To view an image in cross-eyed 3D, put the left image eye view on the right and the right image eye view on the left. It may look blurry at first, but with use, it can become an instinctive, crystal clear viewing method. If you're worried about going blind, don't fret. Doctors have been using 3D images since the 1850s until today as vision therapy to treat lazy eye and other ocular conditions. Any eye discomfort resulting from viewing a 3D image is usually the result of an eye muscle that hasn't gotten enough exercise. With further use, it should pass, and your vision will be stronger for it. So now that you know what 3D basically is, how did we get to where we are today? Let's take a trip through time. world's first known photograph was taken in France in the 1820s, but the camera design was impractical for common use. It wasn't until 1839 that a usable camera was introduced to the public, and that very same year, 3D photography also began. The images would be printed onto cards, with such genres as comedy, romance, and education. Littleton, New Hampshire had a stereo card factory, and for decades it was the biggest source of 3D photography in the world. But once the pictures exist, how to view them? For 3D to work, the left image can only be seen by the left eye, and vice versa. That has been the continuing source of struggle and innovation when it comes to 3D technology, from then till now. A common viewing method at the time was the stereoscope, a device that directed each eye to only the image meant for it, allowing your brain to be tricked into blending the two. These devices were a staple of many a parlor, entertaining guests. They also came to inspire other similar devices, such as the children's toy ViewMaster, which used backlit slides instead of printed photos, as well as today's VR viewers for smartphones. It was in the 1890s that Thomas Edison and his associates introduced motion pictures. And that same decade, 3D movies began to be experimented with. The first iteration involved looking at a screen through a mounted stereoscope, a solution which not only precluded an audience, but required more room and a precise setup. An easier solution was needed, and in 1915, the Astor Theater in New York City hosted a test screening of 3D short films in a new format, Anaglyph. You probably know Anaglyph 3D as red and blue lenses in a paper frame, although they also come in blue and amber, and green and fuchsia. The ones used at this first screening were green and red. Regardless of the colors used, the principle is the same. The left and right eye images are combined, and any discrepancies between them are highlighted in one of the colors, depending on which eye it's meant for. Each color cancels out its counterpart on screen. Therefore, each eye sees a different image. Anaglyph continued to be used for showing 3D movies over the coming years, along with other innovations such as a dedicated twin-lens 3D movie camera, and the first feature-length 3D movie, a 1922 romance drama called The Power of Love. However, Anaglyph had its downsides. Having colored lenses is hard on the eyes, and could lead to eye strain over the course of a full film. Also, in an era where color film was beginning to be experimented with, Anaglyph would degrade any such benefits. A better solution was needed for clear, high-quality imagery. In December of that same year, 1922, the Selwyn Theater in New York City premiered a new science fiction fantasy called The Man from Mars. Instead of both views blended into one film strip, both left and right eyes were on separate film strips that were locked, synchronized, and projected at the same time. However, each projector had shutters that would rapidly open and shut faster than the eye could see, alternating between left and right eye views. Every audience member would also have shutter glasses mounted to their seats that were wired in synchronization to the projector, enabling an audience to, for the first time, watch a clear 3D movie together. However, the system was expensive, complicated, and hard to implement on a large scale. After several weeks of screenings, the shutter glasses method was abandoned, not to be seen again for about 6 decades. In 1947, a film was released in Russia based on the novel Robinson Crusoe, and it utilized glasses-free 3D using lenticular technology. Both images were projected onto a corrugated screen, which sent each view in alternate directions to each eye. However, in order to see it, the audience had to be few in number and sit perpendicular to the screen. This method has continued to be used until today for printed still images. But as far as movies, this wasn't a viable solution. In the meantime, a new innovation would at last give 3D the boost it needed to push it into the mainstream: polarized glasses. Light travels at various wavelengths, many of which are imperceptible to the naked eye. For instance, when you wear sunglasses, harmful rays are filtered out to protect your eyes. But other, harmless light patterns can also be filtered out. For instance, light that travels either clockwise or counterclockwise. To show a 3D movie, all that was needed, as before, were 2 synchronized film strips, except now with filters on the projector head that match up with filters in the audience's glasses. Now, everyone could see a clear, full-color 3D film at a wide viewing angle using only cheap Polaroid glasses. A method very similar to the technology found in most movie theaters today. This opened the doors for 3D to reach the masses, with loads of major releases like adventures, thrillers, science fiction, comedies, and musicals, starring the likes of Vincent Price, Jane Russell, John Wayne, Rita Hayworth, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, one film by Alfred Hitchcock, and many more. Doing 3D the old-fashioned way required work, attention, and know-how. Any slip-up, such as editing a damaged print improperly, or failing to synchronize the projectors properly, could result in headaches or eye strain for the audience. After its heyday of the 1950s, studios largely gave up on 3D to focus on other endeavors such as Cinemascope and other similar ultra-widescreen formats. 3D movies would continue to be released sporadically over the following decades, but often in the easier-to-exhibit Anaglyph format. And where polarized films were shown, many were exploitation films and made with little knowledge of 3D cinematography, resulting in subpar experiences. As mentioned earlier, however, shutter glasses would make a comeback, this time in the consumer electronics field. Also this time in a much simpler version, the glasses would be wired to a device and flicker not physical shutters, but liquid crystal displays, or LCDs, to separate the images in sync with the TV. In this way, any tube television could be converted into a full-color 3D TV. These systems are mentioned in the article Watching the World from the August 22, 1980 issue of Awake magazine. Under the subheading 3D TV, it said, Japanese children wearing special adapter glasses have been able to watch 3D cartoons for about 3 years. What are the prospects for 3D TV in the United States? Uncertainty about the willingness of viewers to buy adapters, glasses, or new TV sets for 3D reception may delay such broadcasts for a long time to come, says the New York Times. The television industry is also hobbled by its lack of agreement on which of several competing systems would be best. The only downside for this method was that televisions didn't yet accept video signals of over 60 frames per second. While this was enough for a decent 3D experience, it wasn't enough to totally eliminate visible flickering, which prevented achieving the best possible video quality. Still, it was the best option at the time, and many products were available on the market for use with shutter glasses, such as a 3D VHS camcorder, an attachment to convert a VHS camcorder to 3D, as well as 3D movies on VHS, Laserdisc, and DVD. Still, as has always been the case, 3D in the home would remain a niche market. In the 1980s, IMAX began showing 3D films with an emphasis on quality, both in filming and in projection. However, these were mostly specialty films, not traditional Hollywood movies. That would begin to change by the turn of the millennium. In 2003, a documentary about the Titanic was the first 3D movie to be recorded digitally, instead of on film, which can be more practical and of better quality. The same camera system was also used to film the wide release that year of Spy Kids 3, although it was shown in Anaglyph at both theaters and on DVD. Some movie theaters had already begun replacing some of their film projectors with digital ones, offering more stable images. Because of the complete digital pipeline now in place from production to screen, the stage was now set for quality 3D to be affordably rolled out worldwide. The first major release in digital 3D was Disney's animated film Chicken Little. And since then, as digital projectors have been installed almost everywhere, 3D films have become an international staple, available to all who choose to watch their movie that way. While various digital 3D methods have been used in the theater, such as shutter glasses and Dolby 3D, which is a higher quality version of Anaglyph, Polarized 3D has become by far the most popular choice, with Real D 3D being the major brand worldwide. But not all of the new 3D movies had to be filmed that way. Groundbreaking technology now allowed pre-existing content to be converted into 3D. Real 3D conversion is never fully automated. It takes intelligent manual input. Some 3D TVs had an automatic 2D to 3D conversion feature, but such a thing is basically impossible. Allow me to illustrate. Here's a black and white photo. If I told you I was going to colorize it, would this suffice? Of course not. While technically it's now in color, It's without regard for the actual content of the picture. A colorization can only be achieved by a human. It's the same with 3D conversion. No software can accurately detect depth in a scene. It will just push the flat image back into the screen or warp it in some other way, but without regard for the actual layers of depth. Even in the case of semi-automated processes, human intervention is always necessary. To make a 3D image, a grayscale image called a depth map is produced, in which white is closer and black is farther, and every gradient of gray in between represents different layers and levels of depth. This is then applied to the original image to produce another eye perspective. To convert a movie, you'd need an animated depth map, which goes in sync with the original video.
And in defense of the Bible as the inspired Word of God.
When 3D first became popular, everyone wanted to jump on the bandwagon and release their upcoming movies in 3D at the last minute, which meant a rushed conversion job. This resulted in a few conversions that were filled with depth errors and eyesores, as well as conversions that were fairly accurate and pleasing, but very subtle and minimal. Soon, though, it would be shown that doing conversions right could be spectacular, and to this day, Jurassic Park remains one of the most powerful conversions ever made. Many other catalog titles were also converted for theatrical and home video release on Blu-ray 3D. Computer animated films that were re-released in 3D, however, didn't need to be converted in that same manner. Since all the animation data already exists in a virtual three-dimensional world, the animators just had to revisit that data and render it from another angle to create another eye view. 3D HD TVs and projectors began to be sold that used shutter glasses, so-called active 3D TVs. Unlike their 1980s counterparts, however, the refresh rates were at least doubled for flicker-free viewing. Then came so-called passive 3D TVs, in which every other line of pixels is an alternate polarity, compatible with the cheap Polarized glasses from the movie theater. While this method cut the horizontal resolution in half when viewed up close, at a normal distance it looked fine, while offering a brighter, easier on the eye's image than active 3D. While 3D film cameras with two lenses for still photos had been sold affordably for many decades already, for the first time ever, twin-lens, high-definition digital cameras and camcorders finally became available to the public, as well as 3D smartphones. Most of these cameras and phones used a glasses-free 3D display using what is called a parallax barrier, which is a thin layer in front of the LCD display that blocks out alternating rows of pixels for each eye. The only device in this area that gained a foothold with the masses would be the Nintendo 3DS, which also had an auto-stereoscopic screen. After a brief surge of novelty, 3D simmered down as far as media popularity goes. But this time, things were different. This time, 3D had become a permanent part of the filmmaking process and home media for anyone choosing to seek it out. And it has a bigger market and more appreciation outside of the US. So, what's next for 3D? While some are waiting for that always elusive glasses-free 3D TV, they may be in for a long wait. Auto-stereoscopic or glasses-free 3D screens look best with one viewer at a time and have lower resolution and a narrow viewing angle. Any technological attempts to circumvent these facts so far have only resulted in further image degradation. That's why they're usually best for personal handheld devices. On the other hand, ultra-high-definition 4K TVs with high dynamic range have improved on the passive TVs of yesterday, offering full HD 3D movies and a bigger color range. 3D at the theater is also getting brighter with laser projection and even backlit LED theater screens. Then, there's the resurgence of VR, or virtual reality, now often powered by the screen of your own smartphone. While most 360 cameras record a flat image in which you can look around yourself, there are many models with 2 or more lenses to record both 3D and 360 at the same time for a very immersive experience. At the same time, VR can also be used to view standard 3D imagery. Yes, stereoscopic 3D is anything but a new technology or a passing fad or gimmick. It has always been here, from the very invention of photography onward. And only halfway through the 20th century, the 5 major methods were already invented: personal viewers, glasses-free, Anaglyph, shutter glasses, and Polarized. This is the same basic technology being used to this day. It has only been improved upon. And as long as there are inventors, as long as there is beauty to capture, as long as there are stories to tell, as long as there are people with 2 eyes, it always will. There's TV up ahead, 3D. Put those glasses on my head, 3D. Oh, all these pretty things I see coming out at me on this 3D TV. Rising every line, shutter sinking all the time. Doesn't matter how it does it, don't you see? Depth comes out, depth goes through, even with old red and blue. There's more to see if it's 3D. 3D, there's TV up ahead, 3D. Put those glasses on my head, 3D. Oh, all these pretty things I see coming out at me on this 3D TV. 3D, there's TV up ahead, 3D. Put those glasses on my head, 3D.